This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation. Welcome all of you, the viewers of Common Sense Generation. With me is William Richardson, journalist, writer, entrepreneur, TV presenter.
Yeah.
A lot of different jobs.
Yeah.
Well, you're an American.
Dishwasher at home.
Dishwasher,
At home.
perfect. You're American, living in Europe. This is sort of unique, but tell us at the beginning, you're a writer as well, and right now you are finishing a book about the 90s in Eastern Europe.
That's right, yeah.
What's your perspective?
Well, this book is, it's based on interviews with someone. So it's not about me. It's a novelized account, and I hope it'll be funny as well as, it'll be funny as well as grabbing the heartstrings or whatever.
And there were real, serious stuff those times.
Yeah, I'm trying to do a story that is not too heavy, but has everything in it that you need to know situationally to understand what it was like for this particular character to be a young man coming to Poland and falling in love with the chaos and the difference, coming from a well-organized Western country to this chaotic Central Europe, and the clash that takes place in his life and his mind. It changes him completely and puts him on a different track. I can't say that happened to me. It didn't change me completely. I've always been extremely adventurous. And when I moved to Central Europe, Central Eastern Europe, whatever you want to call it, it was not my first adventure. I'd been living in Great Britain for a number of years.
This is a huge adventure for an American to move to Great Britain.
But this was very different, I have to say. And I came here, I wanted to see why it was different and compare it to the socialists I met in England, who seemed to me to have made a rather lackluster effort at recreating their country. It was rather gray and boring. It's been much better, even under Tony Blair. I should say, especially under Tony Blair. Once the seeds had been sown, it became a much more colorful and interesting place. A bit lost for the last decade or so, in a very strange fog. But coming out, that happens to people. But anyway, looking at Poland in the 90s, you can go to the basic things. You go into the Dom Towarowy Centrum. This was a series of large shops in the center of Warsaw, which were full of nothing. Plastic shoes, red velour material. If you wanted to make some red velour dresses or curtains or anything, you have plenty of that. Red velour was like a prized possession. I remember just being astounded walking through those department stores and going, there's nothing here. Also, there was no color. There was no advertising, and in some sense, we look at advertising and say, well, maybe there's too much, and certainly with the internet and all that, there's probably too much. But when there's none, you miss it, because it's also advertising has its artistic side too, right?
Absolutely, and there is this element of news also, or you see what the trends, how they are shaping somehow. Usually there are a lot of pretty young women all over the posters.
Yeah, I'm against that.
Anything you can advertise anything with the usage of young women.
Oh, we've seen that on the internet. All you have to do. Women become stars just by being women on the internet. They become influencers just by being attractive. No talent is necessary anymore. No talent is necessary at all.
That's a bit true, but the scary thing
No,
is
I'm not against pretty women. I like pretty women, but if you're going to be famous for something. Marilyn Monroe had talent, right? And perseverance. For example, to take an epitome.
She started reading the books of Arthur Miller eventually when she married him?
No, before. She knew who he was before, because she was studying acting. After she was in Hollywood, she went to New York. When she grew up in California, in Los Angeles area. But after she had been in a few early films, she actually went to New York and enrolled in the Actors Studio. So she knew very well what was going on in the theater. She never appeared in the theater, but she wanted to. And she was absolutely bowled over by Arthur Miller because he symbolized everything that, she didn't have, this New England background, this New England, New York background, Northeast background, intellectual achievement. He had written some of the most watched and written about plays, including one that I find very depressing, Death of a Salesman. There's enough, we can go on, that's a whole show to talk about why I don't like Death of a Salesman.
But coming back to your book.
But I respect Arthur.
About the 90s in Poland or in Eastern Europe. Yeah. What's the title? Do you know it already?
I've got a title yet. I've got several in mind. But I can tell you that it takes place in a small city in a beautiful area of Poland, in Olsztyn, and then in Warsaw, the action. And it follows the comic misadventures of our protagonist and his many, it's rather a picaresque, but there are a couple of plot twists in it, sure, several actually.
So is it something, because it's a little bit of your journey, what you've done when you were young, of course, moving as American from US to...
Well, I recognize everything, and it's not about me, though, this book. It really is, it's informed by my personality or whatever, my ability, but, and my knowledge.
I'm not saying it's an autobiography. Yeah. What I'm asking you about is, you see this a mental difference between US and Europe, especially Eastern Europe.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Tell us about it. What's
well,
this?
I'm an historian by trade. This is what I studied in the various... I got the History Award when I was 12. I got the History Award in high school, right, as well. I got the History Award in elementary school. I got the History Award in high school. I was the historian in my fraternity. I studied history and graduated with honors. Got scholarships twice in history. So history is my thing.
Okay, we know you were a good student.
But I didn't want to be an academic because I prefer common sense.
Oh, that's a good...
I wanted to go out and see the world and write about the world, both as a journalist and eventually writing books. I wrote a couple of plays as well when I lived in London, and they were on The Fringe. But so I started really in the theater. But looking at... go ahead with your question.
My question is the mental difference between US and Europe, and eventually you chose to at least to
the history. The history is everywhere. This is the main thing, because it creates a whole different background, a whole different atmosphere when you can get in your car and go see a castle, or in any European major capital, walk down the street and see a castle.
Yes.
And you can't do that unless it's Disneyland in America. And that has to me always been the operative difference too. I can give you two images.
Yes.
One, when I went to Prague for the first time, I wrote a story about Prague. It was widely published, I'm happy to say. And at the time it meant a lot to me because it was very competitive, still is. But I wrote a story, and the first line was, Prague is like a beautiful woman. Only she is dead.
That's a good word.
And that goes for Vienna as well, because they are like that.
Yes.
And they are the real Disneyland, or the Warsaw Old Town is a Disneyland, because actually it's not the real Old Town. It looks exactly like an old town, so it's even more Disney than Disney, but it's a total recreation.
It is, mostly.
Based on the plans and on Canaletto,
yes.
the Younger's paintings.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. But you're right about things that there is a lot of history in Europe, but a lot of those places are dead. In Poland, Warsaw is alive. Krakow, as a historic city, it's dead. It's full of British drunk tourists.
Yeah.
It's full of hotels. It's full of most beautiful stone houses.
It's a great place in the winter.
It's a great place to visit, it's a great place to have vacation, but it's a horrible place to make business because there's not that much going on, except you have a business directed for tourism, so a hotel, a restaurant.
Great place for tourism, yeah. People say, oh, I must see Krakow. But I always preferred Warsaw because to me it was a really dirty, it's that Alphaville feeling, like the Jean-Luc Godard film, Alphaville. Watch that film. I say to you, if you haven't seen it, to everyone, watch that film. You'll get a real sense of what Warsaw was like in the early 90s. It was a really tough town in transition, and I loved that. I thought it was exciting. It was like being in a film noir every day.
The funny thing is,
it was amazing.
When there is a transition between the systems, and that's what happened in Poland during these times, and that's, I think, what's happening right now in Ukraine. There is a transition caused in the face of war, but in the moment of transition, there is a lot of chaos. But there is a lot of space and freedom for people who have an idea, who want to, and that's a moment when usually you can shape and build a lot of things.
A lot of fortunes were made, a lot of fortunes were lost. I know people who made a lot of money and lost a lot of money. I know some who came back. And I mean, I really know a lot of the business founders from that time. Some of them I know that long, actually, because I interviewed them. That's how I met them. I was writing business stuff as well at the time.
And
I
those
wrote for The Economist
who succeed
as well.
Right now can be millionaires or even
Oh yeah, a lot of them did very well, but some of them also lost everything. And some people couldn't take it. They drank too much. They got on the vodka train and they got shipped back home. I know one guy who was a prominent developer, American, from the west coast of America, California, I believe, or Oregon. And he had to get shipped back by the U.S. Embassy. They had to buy him a ticket and send him back so he could get his life together again. And it's not the only time I've heard that story. Or people from England or Britain who had to just get out of here because they couldn't handle it, the stress of the place. It was very stressful. And drinking was a way to get through that for a lot of people. Plus, they were just fun parties, It was really wild. It was Wild West. It was Wild East, as people say. It was a pierogi Western, as some of us said.
Isn't it right? Like when you proceed with a state,
pierogi Eastern, maybe.
when a state is sort of more organized, when there's less chaos, then you feel more secure, of course. But there is also less opportunity, and this feeling of less opportunity, I think, is something what dwells in hearts and minds of many people in the West. That they see that every place is taken, every stool is taken, and where they're supposed to...
A lot of young people think that, I think.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of, if you're young, you know why. Because of the cost of living, because of the difficulty of affording accommodation beyond living with your parents and paying them.
But this is the thing right now.
Which really restricts freedom, and that's a bad thing. That's
very
something
much
that has to
restricts
be addressed.
freedom.
Yeah. Well, there's way too much wealth at the top. There's way too many people who run companies who make so much more money than the basic employees. Many, many times, 100,000 times over what those people pay once you figure in bonuses. Elon Musk, for example, let's take a prime case, is looking at trying to make, $40 billion as a bonus? It's ridiculous. Come on, Elon, calm down, you are a genius, but calm down.
Elon just had his 12th child.
I don't care about that. We need people. The Polish government should be paying people, or say you get a tax holiday up to a certain amount if you have 2 or 3 or 4, and as your kids go, because Poland has a chance to be an amazing country, for example, as the leading country in Central Europe that I happen to know the best. Looking like being a leading country, top 2 or 3 in Europe in the next decade, if not sooner. Poland needs to really invest in its people. because
most of the Western countries look at that.
Yeah.
The one of the biggest
future.
problems is in US right now is of course this huge organization called Planned Parenthood, which in fact is the way to limit
this is an old organization from the 60s. Yeah.
Yeah, but it exists as a huge thing and a huge structure, mostly to limit the growth of the black population. Isn't it the way?
I mean, and it's not just the black population, because that propaganda about overpopulation that
Exactly.
was fed
So
to people
are the
was ridiculous, because if you don't repopulate, then other people will come to your country and fill those jobs and take over your country. This is just basic economics. Labor will be found to fill those positions. If you don't have the labor in your own country with your own traditions, then other people from other countries will come, and eventually there will be more of them if you don't repopulate. And this is a consistent
Isn't it the case
problem.
right now in California and US that most of the high tech
California has a lot of problems.
the most of the high tech is taken actually by Indians who are very smart in this field.
Well, the
but they're
Indians
running
are
the show.
everywhere. I used to say yes, but yes, not
But
just
they
there.
are repopulating the most in the world.
But just in terms of sheer humanity. I mean, I've been saying for years and years, just looking at things, it used to be a joke, and unfortunately it seems to be true now, that the Indians and the Chinese could easily send 250 million people each out of their countries and just say, all right, everybody, get busy again, produce more people, and send those people, and that repopulates the United States, equals the United States population of 30 years ago, because they put on 100 million people since 1985.
But US in the same moment.
And Europe as well, almost.
US in the same moment,
getting close, yeah.
Except actually the biggest country with the abortion rate is Russia. Funny say, the Mecca
they're
of
literally killing themselves in Russia.
Yes.
And in this ridiculous war as well.
And also the country where there's a huge 50% of marriages in Russia are falling apart. So it's destruction of the family. But
well, again, you have a very tiny elite there, and they don't care. Neither do they care about their soldiers nor the people outside of the main 2 or 3 population centers. And those people can't afford families. They can barely afford to survive, a lot of them.
But in US, people can afford families very often, most of them, and still it's the middle class who's just treating and using abortions as a anti-conception.
Well, the middle class is under attack from every area, it looks like, in the United States since probably the late 70s, every economic factor. But they also under attack from themselves, as you wisely point out, because no sense of self-preservation. Look, life is more than comforts. Comforts are nice, but sometimes a hard cot and a mission is the best thing for you, and that'll sustain you in life. Having an idea about what you want to do and where you want to go will sustain you much more than all the comforts, which actually weaken you. I refer you to Marcus Aurelius, who had it all and preferred that hard
So
cot.
now we have a Stoic approach.
Yeah.
So common sense is also a form of self-preservation.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. It starts there.
It starts there.
Yeah.
But I think it starts also in the fact that you respect the family, isn't it the case?
You must respect and tolerate. It's like you have to tolerate. Even if you don't like it, you have to tolerate, you have to get along. It's not revolution. You say you want a revolution. Remember the Beatles song? It's a very ironic take on revolution from none other than John Lennon, who everybody thinks was a great Marxist. He was not, he was a capitalist. But he was like a tolerant capitalist. That was the idea, really, that John Lennon was putting forth. He liked money. He said it openly, constantly. Okay, so okay, what's the thread to come back?
Self-preservation and family.
Yes, family. Of course, family is very important. Actually, communism begins in the family. And the most communist institution is the family, because you do things for no reason except that you care, that you're altruistic very often, because it's your family, it's the people that brought you into the world, okay, or the people that you've known since you were born. All right, it doesn't always work out. That's the ideal paradigm, but that needs to be supported. And if you want real communism, communism begins at home. But as you grow in the political system, the more you get from locality, from city, municipal, to county, to province, as you go up, it should become more conservative. It naturally does, because then you're dealing with resources that don't belong to you. And you have to practice that tolerance and common sense there.
I think it's a wonderful punchline for the common sense generation. I do hope that we are creating the common sense generation through many generations, not only the youngest people, not only people my age, but all over the society, so people who think alike, and they want to speak about it, and they want to be vocal, and they do care. Because funny things is those 5% who is actually making protests and advocating for things, and they are heard in the society. The rest, the hardworking rest, who is just kept silence, has very often no voice.
The silent majority, as Richard Nixon called them. He coined that phrase, or it was coined for him probably. But it's come back to the forefront. But listen, these things have happened. These eruptions, if we're looking at the United States or Europe, these things have happened. These eruptions, these ructions have happened. These earthquakes, these seismic shifts have happened throughout history. It's nothing new. And this is not the word, it's a bad presidential election in the United States. And it's bad politically right now, but go back to the 20s when Pilsudski was fighting with various forces and decided, a plague on all your houses. In Poland, for example. Look at Weimar Germany. Look at the post-World War I world. It was a complete mess. Look at what led to World War I. We've had worse times. People are healthier. They have more access to information and more access to healthcare and food and nutrition than they ever have, okay? Than ever in the history of the world. That is a fact. But we can do better. Okay?
And this is the punchline, of course, that we can do better. Yeah. A very beautiful and important thing that
we have to think about each other.
We can also make a change. And this is something for you, the viewers of Common Sense Generation, that your voice matters and your actions matter. And that's why it is important to have some common sense. Thank you for watching this show, and I thank a Polish National Foundation for making this video podcast possible.
This is Common Sense Generation.